The sterile hospital lights flickered overhead as Chen pushed through the emergency room doors, his designer suit disheveled and his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd left the most important board meeting of his career without explanation, driven by nothing more than a cryptic text from his assistant about a family emergency. But Marcus had no family, not anymore. Not since he'd signed those divorce papers 5 years ago, choosing his empire over everything else that mattered. He approached the reception desk breathless, when a familiar laugh stopped him cold. It was soft, musical, tinged with exhaustion, but unmistakable. A sound he'd convinced. Himself he'd forgotten, but that still lived somewhere deep in his chest, gathering dust alongside all the other things he'd sacrificed for success. Sarah. She stood near the pediatric ward entrance, her honey-colored hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face makeup-free and more beautiful than any of the polished women who'd graced his arm at charity galas. Over the past 5 years, she was speaking softly to a nurse, her hands clasped together in that way she always did when she was worried. And beside her, holding her hand with fierce determination, stood a boy. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. The child couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in the exact same stubborn way Marcus's did every morning. The boy had Sarah's delicate features, but his eyes, those serious, observant eyes, were studying the hospital corridor with an intensity Marcus recognized from his own reflection. "Mr. Chen?" His assistant, Jennifer, appeared at his elbow, looking confused. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. I was told to contact you about a medical emergency involving your family, but..." Marcus held up a hand, silencing her, his gaze never leaving the small figure clutching Sarah's hand. The boy was pale, clearly unwell, but standing straight with a courage that seemed too big for his small frame. As if sensing the weight of Marcus's stare, the child turned, and their eyes met across the crowded emergency room. Time fractured. Marcus saw himself at that age, sitting in another hospital waiting for news about his mother, trying to be brave when he was terrified. He saw every choice he'd made, every late night at the office, every anniversary dinner he'd missed, every time Sarah had asked him to slow down and he'd promised he would, after this deal, after this merger, after this quarter's earnings. "Mommy, that man is looking at us," the boy said, his voice carrying across the space between them. Sarah's head snapped up and the color drained from her face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, as if remembering herself, she scooped the boy into her arms despite his obvious protest that he was too big for carrying, and turned toward the treatment rooms. "Wait," Marcus's voice came out rougher than intended. His feet moved before his brain could engage, crossing the distance between them in long strides. "Sarah, please." She stopped but didn't turn around. Her shoulders were rigid, protective. "You shouldn't be here, Marcus." "I got a call. They said family emergency." He was close enough now to see the dark circles under her eyes, the worry lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. "Who called me?" "I did," the voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to find Dr. Patricia Monroe, Sarah's childhood friend and the hospital's chief of pediatrics. She looked unapologetic. "That boy needs a blood transfusion, Marcus. He has a rare blood type, AB negative, same as yours, I believe." The world tilted slightly on its axis. Sarah finally turned, adjusting the boy on her hip. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. "Patricia, you had no right." "I had every right," Patricia interrupted gently. "Ethan's welfare comes first. You know that." "Ethan, his name was Ethan." Marcus did the math automatically, his business mind calculating the timeline even as his heart was trying to process the impossibility standing before him. 5 years ago, just before the divorce was finalized, there had been one last night. One final goodbye that had felt like drowning and breathing all at once. "Is he—" Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's eyes, those green eyes that had once looked at him with such love, were now guarded, fierce with maternal protection. "He's mine. That's all you need to know." "Sarah, please." Marcus kept his voice low, aware of the small ears now pressed against Sarah's shoulder. "I'm not here to disrupt your life. If he needs help, let me help. Whatever happened between us..." "What happened between us," Sarah said quietly, her voice shaking slightly, "was that you chose your company over having a family. You made it very clear that children would interfere with your goals, so I made my choice too. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus remembered that conversation. Remembered his exact words. I'm not ready to be a father. Maybe not ever. The company needs me fully committed. He'd meant it then. Believed his work was too important. That he had time for family later, always later. Ethan lifted his head from Sarah's shoulder, studying Marcus with those unnervingly familiar eyes. Are you my daddy? He asked with the brutal honesty only children possess. Sarah's sharp intake of breath was audible. Ethan, sweetheart. Ethan Chen? A nurse appeared with a clipboard. We're ready for him now. I'll carry him, Marcus said before he could stop himself. When Sarah started to protest, he added, Please, let me do this one thing. Something in his voice must have reached her, because after a long moment, she nodded. Ethan came to him without hesitation, his small arms wrapping around Marcus's neck with trust that felt both wonderful and heartbreaking. The boy was warm, solid, real in a way that made Marcus's accomplishments feel suddenly hollow. As they walked toward the treatment room, Ethan whispered, I'm not scared. I know you're not, Marcus whispered back. You're very brave. Mommy says brave people can still be scared. They just don't let it stop them. Marcus glanced at Sarah walking beside them, and she met his eyes briefly. In that moment, he saw years of bravery he'd been too blind to recognize. The courage it took to leave, the strength required to raise a child alone, the sacrifice of keeping his existence secret, perhaps to protect herself, or perhaps to protect Ethan from a father who hadn't wanted him. The blood transfusion setup was routine, the doctors assured them. Ethan had a viral infection that was affecting his blood cell count. He'd be fine with rest, medication, and the transfusion. As Marcus rolled up his sleeve in the adjacent chair, allowing them to prep his arm, Ethan watched with fascination. Does it hurt? Ethan asked. A little, Marcus admitted. But some things are worth a little pain. Sarah stood near the window, her arms wrapped around herself, and Marcus could see her struggling not to cry. He wanted to tell her everything he'd learned in the past 5 years of emptiness. How success meant nothing without someone to share it with. How he'd wake up sometimes reaching for her before remembering she was gone. He wanted to tell her about the nursery he'd seen at her friend's house too, years ago, that had made him physically ill with longing. The realization that he'd thrown away what mattered most. But words seemed inadequate, so instead, he sat quietly as his blood flowed through the tubes, literally giving life to the son he hadn't known existed. Why did you come? Sarah finally asked, her voice barely audible. Marcus watched Ethan, who was dozing now, his small hand resting near, Marcus's larger one on the armrest between their chairs. I thought it was about business. The message said family emergency at County Hospital. I assumed someone made a mistake with my emergency contacts. But you came anyway. I came anyway. Sarah moved closer, looking down at Ethan's peaceful face. He asks about you sometimes. I kept some photos. He found them last year, wanted to know who the man with Mommy was. She paused. I told him you were someone who had to go away for important work, that you didn't know about him. Sarah, I was going to tell you, her voice cracked. After he was born. But then I saw you on the news, announcing your company's IPO, talking about how you were married to your work. You looked so happy, Marcus, happier than you'd ever looked with me. So I decided he deserved better than a father who'd see him as an obligation. Marcus felt tears burn his eyes for the first time in decades. I was miserable. Every success was ashes. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that I'd done what I needed to do. But I was lying. I was so afraid of failing at fatherhood. Like my dad failed at everything that I failed. At the most important thing before I even tried. The transfusion took 90 minutes. They sat in silence mostly, the only sounds the beeping of monitors and Ethan's soft breathing. When it was done and the nurses had checked both of them, Sarah finally spoke again. He wants to join Little League next year. He's obsessed with dinosaurs. He has nightmares sometimes. And the only thing that helps is when I sing him the song my mother used to sing to me. She wiped her eyes. I'm not asking for anything, Marcus. We've managed fine. I have a good job at the library now. We have a small apartment. He's happy. But he asks about me. Yes. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, at this perfect small person who existed, because of one night of goodbye. that had somehow become hello. I don't know how to be a father. I'd probably mess it up. I'd definitely mess it up. Probably, Sarah agreed, and there was the faintest hint of her old smile. But I want to try. He met her eyes. If you'll let me, not as someone trying to reclaim what he threw away, but as someone who wants to be part of his life, however that looks, whatever pace you're comfortable with. I'm not asking to step in and play dad. I'm asking for the chance to earn it, to be someone he can count on. Sarah was quiet for a long time, studying him with those perceptive eyes that had always seen through his defenses. Finally, she said, he likes pancakes on Saturday mornings. With chocolate chips. Marcus felt hope bloom in his chest. Yeah, and he needs someone consistent, Marcus. Not someone who shows up for a month and then disappears when work gets busy. If you're going to be in his life, you're in it, fully. That's non-negotiable. I understand. And he did. He thought of his calendar, packed with meetings and obligations that had seemed so crucial an hour ago. He thought of the board, waiting for his return. He thought of everything he'd built over 5 years of lonely success. Then he looked at his son and knew with absolute certainty what mattered. I'll be there. Every Saturday. Whatever else he needs. Whatever you both need. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked confused for a moment, then focused on Marcus. You're still here. I'm still here, Marcus confirmed. Are you going to come back? Marcus glanced at Sarah, saw her subtle nod, and felt his heart nearly burst. If that's okay with you and your mom, I'd like to. Maybe we could get pancakes sometime. Ethan's face lit up with a smile so like Sarah's it hurt. With chocolate chips? With as many chocolate chips as your mom says you can have? As they prepared to move Ethan to a recovery room, Patricia appeared in the doorway looking satisfied. Told you I was right to call him, she murmured to Sarah. Sarah shook her head but was smiling. You're impossible. I'm a brilliant friend who refuses to let you martyr yourself, Patricia corrected. And that kid deserves his father. Walking out of the hospital 2 hours later, Ethan now discharged and clutching a stuffed dinosaur from the gift shop courtesy of Marcus. Felt like walking into a new life. Marcus had called his assistant, canceling everything for the rest of the week. The board would manage. They'd have to. At Sarah's car, an old sedan that had seen better days, Marcus hesitated. Can I call you? Tomorrow? Saturday, Sarah said. Come by at 9. I'll make coffee. Ethan can show you his dinosaur collection. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door opening. And Marcus would spend however long it took proving he could walk through it and stay. As he watched them drive away, Ethan waving enthusiastically from his car seat, Marcus realized that 5 years ago, he'd thought he was choosing his future by letting Sarah go. Today, holding his son, giving him life through his blood, he understood he'd been running from it. Success wasn't measured in stock prices or quarterly reports. It was measured in chocolate chip, pancakes on Saturday mornings, and bedtime songs and showing up, day after day for the people who needed you. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his assistant. Clear my Saturdays indefinitely. Family commitment, non-negotiable. Then Marcus Chen, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, sat on a hospital bench and cried tears of gratitude for a second chance he didn't deserve, but would spend the rest of his life earning. Because sometimes the greatest success comes from admitting your failures and having the courage to try again, to be better, to choose love over ambition and presence over prestige. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what you should have been fighting. For all along,